Okay, for those of you who were at last year's advisory group meeting, it was designed as a little bit more of an open format. We had breakout sessions, and we also had this lightning talk session. The breakout sessions didn't make it into this year's, but backed by popular demand for some reason is the lightning talk session. It's last year it was on the last day. This year on purpose we put it on the first day because it can be considered as a little bit of a dating portal. I managed to convince 7 people to have a short presentation, and they can either introduce work in process or in progress or ask a question to everyone in the room, and the idea is that that's fodder for more discussion over dinner. Okay, so Maya will start us off.
Thanks, Mickey. Okay, so I should start by saying that I'm from Cambridge University Library, and we are ex libris customers of Alma and Primo, but we are not Rosetta customers. I'm working with these guys. We're part of the Polonsky Digital Preservation Project. Richard Obbenden from Oxford introduced the project earlier on today, but there are 3 of us in each institution looking at very holistic approaches to digital preservation. So policy and planning, training and outreach, and technical. We're looking at the needs of the institutions, and we're about 10 months through a 2-year funded project. And I guess there are some differences between Oxford and Cambridge, and so I'm going to speak more about the Cambridge side of things. So our aims are to really do some surveyings of the collection, some surveyings of our skills and our systems and our capabilities, and then produce gap analysis. The initial outcome, or the sort of ideal outcome, is really costed business cases. And so from Cambridge University Library's side of things, we are doing a number of different things. Some of those are case studies, so we'll be looking at case studies for what I call 3 of our 7 different classes of materials. So research data, which has come up a lot today, born digital materials, and that's a bit more of my background, and the digitised materials, so we do a lot of digitisation. And so you saw Oxford's Mirador delivery system there. We have our own Cambridge University delivery system using the OpenSea Dragon technologies as well. And so for Cambridge's side of things, and I should just mention in here that I came from the State Library of New South Wales, so a lot of the things that I'm thinking about are very much informed by the 18 months, 2 years that I spent working with you and other colleagues at the State Library of New South Wales. This is my list of demands, right? It doesn't necessarily reflect everyone's demands, and as I said, we're talking very holistically, so digital stewardship rather than just digital preservation. We need to know how the material is created and then processed all the way through to being managed in delivery systems, in storage, and then access provided at the other end. And so my list of demands about digital preservation systems is very much about how these workflows are going. So integration with all the other library systems, and it's not just your catalogues and your archival management systems, it's your workflow management tools. So we may reinstate Gooby at some point in time to manage our digitisation workflows. All the other processes that are being done during arrangement and selection. It really has to be standards-based, and I know that I'm going back to some experiences at the State Library of New South Wales, but if you can't validate, or if you can't conform to the schemas, or if you're picking and choosing parts of a standard like premise but not the whole thing, it's going to be very hard to move material from one place to the other. And hard, I mean, it's more effort, it's more staff time. Error handling is something that I think there's levels of maturity that are very much needed in this space. Again, we don't have the staff and the resources to do that kind of deep analysis. So can we find better ways of handling the errors, prioritising the errors, and saying, you know, lots of people in this room have talked to me in the past, or even we've heard today about, those drove errors, we just ignore those ones. We know that they're there, but we don't have time to get to those ones. And I think we have to think about where is our effort best focused. Reporting we do, and this is, you know, we think about 3 kinds of levels of reporting. So the very high level reporting, they need to produce annual reports, management reporting, so reporting on the successes and failures of the systems, and then preservation planning reporting. So how can those reports be produced in ways that are very easy and easy to get access to. And then this is something that just hangs around with me continuously. The digital files are not just the files themselves, they're the files with the metadata, and so absolutely the sources of truth should be in the right place, but some of that metadata really needs to travel with those files to become digital objects, and that can't be split out. And we've seen issues and errors around all of this. And so these are some of the things that I think about when, as Cambridge, we're looking at all the different digital preservation systems we can get our hands on. So Rosetta is one of those, Preservica, Rhoda, you know, the usual suspects, Archivematica. So these are the kinds of things in the back of my head, and it's about the levels of maturity that we need with minimal staffing resources. And so how can we best prioritise and focus our effort? Anyway, I've probably gone over time. Thanks.
Of course, it's not just me, but also my colleague Andres. As Oliver Mosseri has hinted at this morning, we're pretty much the new kids on the block regarding Rosetta. And just like a couple of our colleagues in the German-speaking countries, we're running Rosetta in a consortial mode. Regarding the aforementioned 40 institutions, yes, in the very long run, it can be up to 40 institutions in our federal state, North Rhine-Westphalia, who may use Rosetta. At this stage, we're working with 3 pilot partner institutions, and there's another 3 who have shown interest in participating in this project. Now, we're addressing different players in administration, library, and research field, with a focus on libraries and researchers at this time. Of course, they come to us with heterogeneous materials, and their main goals are, of course, long-term preservation, but also long-term availability. So throughout the whole project, we're focusing at delivering these materials as well.
Yes, but also we say it's a very much focus on availability. It's not that we want to build up a direct access system like digital asset management system. It's rather so that we leave the availability to the original systems where the materials will deliver with.
What are the requirements of our partners? They want to keep their research data in a trusted environment. I'll get back to that later. Some of them want to go with big data. And there's one university that we are working with. They were asking for an open system that is open for enhancements, that has to do with the many different formats that we are expecting. And as I said before, we are working in a consortium model, which also implies the exchange of knowledge and building synergies. So there's 2 ways we run this project. Number 1, a central Rosetta installation in the HPZ, but also the possibility for partners to run their own instance. And we've got both modes in our pilot project. Well, the interest mainly for the data centers who run their own installation is data ownership and ways to handle big data, but they also have responsibilities in order to understand what we are preserving. The libraries need to communicate with the researchers and to find out what kind of data need to be preserved and what is their structure and what is significant about it and needs to be preserved.
And I think it's some of our biggest challenges to convince the data centers and also libraries to work with this and to get these maybe rather steep knowledge curves they have to take.
And why is that? I think because there is very little non-technical infrastructure existent at this moment. It starts to develop, especially because research data management is an upcoming theme. But this is just being created right now. Well, who are the pilot partners? It's free at the moment, which is University of Cologne Library, as well as the data center of University of Cologne, and also University of Aachen. In this case, the data center of University of Cologne is the one that runs its own installation of Rosetta. At HPZ, we are running a sandbox, which is going to be the test environment, also in the long term, and the production system, whereas the data center of Cologne is just running a production system. Right now, we are awaiting hardware for our production system. It should arrive soon, we hope. And, well, most of you might know the usual way a Rosetta project starts. Right now, we are between the first and second functional call and deep in the training phase. And, well, what else can we say? I think it's very much, at least 80% intense communication with the pilot partners, and the rest is technical work. So I hope this is going to balance in the long run. That's it from our side. Thank you.
Quickly. Arrows. Oh yeah. Oh, you took them off. So Dave Allen, State Library of Queensland. I'm just presenting two nightmares I've got at the moment. Only two. Well, the top two. That's us. But basically, someone showed up and said, we've got some disk images, some disks from this Michael Bryce guy, who, for people from Queensland would understand, or from Australia would know that his wife happens to be the ex-Governor General of Australia. So all that sort of stuff. But he's a pretty important guy in that he's done the signage for the 1982 Commonwealth Games, he's did the logo for the Queensland government, he's done all this weird stuff, more stuff that he's done, so it's a significant collection for us. But it's all on 260 discs, so I got a mixture of CD-ROMs and DVDs. And I just thought they'd be just full of images. Unbeknownst to me, after our people had a look at it, they said they don't understand it, and I thought, but they're just images. And then I opened it up, which you can't really see too well, but that's one of the projects he's got in there. And you'll find there's every job he's done, he's created these project files. And so you've got the concept stuff, the development stuff, you've got a whole pile of stuff in there, a lot of stuff. And then when you open up further, you go, oh, there's more stuff. So which one is this the real stuff? And I'm going, my God. And then he's got a directory there called emails. So stuffing around in there, you can look at the emails, you can see the conversations between him and the customers, or his clients, trying to figure out which one is the best version to be used. So this is like, oh, what a pain. Anyway, so I found these INDD files, which took a little bit to figure out that it's not an image file, regardless of what's there. It's a Adobe InDesign stuff. And when you start it up, it says this. And I thought, oh, that's getting worse. Which is all right because it looked like it rendered okay. Until I looked at the next picture, and you'll see the picture of, you can't see it too well, but she's a bit more pixelated, so there's something's happened in the whole rendering process, and I think it's to do with that problem. So one of the things that I like to be able to do is that we're going to have to spend a lot of time mucking around with these particular disk image archives, and it'd be great after we figure out which version of Adobe InDesign we have to use, which mail program we have to use, which version of, because it's probably, because he's a designer, it's probably which version of Apple operating system he's using. I'd really like to be able to store that information to some sort of premise container. So premise 3 is really nice if it implemented well. That's a segue into your project, your work group. And my other problem is, it's being recorded so I can't say anything bad here, SLQ requires Alma to be the source of all truth for all descriptive metadata, so they want to make it the repository. I won't go into reasons why because it's being recorded. What we'd really, the IE descriptive metadata is actually replicating back and forth between Alma really nicely. It's working really well except for collection stuff, but we won't go there. And what we really like to be able to do is go to the next stage and actually replicate the file level descriptive metadata into Alma, because we actually want to have an IE with multiple file level descriptive metadata in an IE container. And we only want to update it purely in Alma, and hopefully that gets replicated back into the file level stuff. And that's it, it's pretty easy. It can be done tomorrow, so Eddie says.
I want to talk about a migration action we are actually testing with the Rosetta preservation planning module. We have built a plugin which carries all the standard PDF files to a folder. Then the PDF-A pilot from Colors converts them to PDF-A files, at least in most of the cases. And there's a really detailed report you can have in XML or HTML format, which with all the information what exactly has happened to the file, which fonts were embedded as an afterthought because they weren't embedded in the first place, and what else has been changed at the with the PDF to get it a valid PDF-A file. We really would like this information in our archive afterwards, but at the moment the plugin only fetches the PDF-A file and not the report, and we cannot think of a really good solution yet to get all the information within Rosetta. So right now you only see the different versions, which is fine, but that's not sufficient. We really would like to have all this information from the XML file in, well, not all, but some crucial information of it within Rosetta. So what can we do? Can we just transfer the whole file into Rosetta, and how can we do that? Or can we just put it somehow into the metadata, and how could we do that? Or can we just save it as a premise event? We have ideas, but we don't have a solution. And whoever has questions, ideas, solutions, suggestions can talk to me whenever you want to. Thank you.
Okay, mine's more of a fact-finding mission. We are trying to build a digital preservation team and a capability, so it's more questions than it is information. So the first question is, for those of us who have got a digital preservation system, can I just see a show of hands about who has actually got a digital preservation team? Okay, I'm just trying to get, I should have used Artie's technology. I'm going to go low tech with this. Hands up if you don't have a digital preservation team but you'd like one. Okay, I'm just going to write down some key people here. Okay, the next is, if you do have a digital preservation capability, hands up if it's centralized. Centralized meaning it's a single team, not across units. Okay, and who's decentralized, as in it's within different business units. Okay, this is going to be a funny one. Size of team. Who's got a team of one? No teams of one? Team of one? You're the only person? Okay. Yeah. So what's your role? Digital Preservation Manager. Okay, I'm going to go the next step up. Maybe who's got a team of less than 5? Less than 5. 100%. Who's got more than 5? Okay, I'm going to need to hear some numbers here. So Steve? 9? And, sorry? And 9 as well. Okay, I've listed some typical roles up here. I guess manager, digital preservation, developers, technical analysts, someone involved in strategy, policy, a sysadmin looking after the back end, and application support. I know collection management could potentially sit outside of this. Are there any other roles that I haven't thought about that others have got, especially the ones with the 9?
I suggested you had something along a BA line for thinking about requirements and enhancement developments across the whole program.
Is that an FT?
We have one of those.
Okay, no, I'll do one more question. The last question, I guess, is about who's got an active digital preservation training program? You are actually pushing this out within your institution.
50-50.
50. Archives. Okay. Is anyone interested in me sharing this with the rest of the Rosetta user group? Yep. Okay. I might take a more of a tactical approach to this.
Sorry, so apparently we need to, there's another group coming, so we just have caught for 2 more minutes, because you won't be here tomorrow, and then we'll continue this later on. So, sorry for this. Just, okay, here.
Okay, I'll be as quick as possible. I'm aware I talk fast anyway. I'm aware I'm standing between people and dinner. So yeah, my name's Carl Wilson. I'm technical lead at the Open Preservation Foundation, Ex Libris, recent members, and I'm going backwards, not forward now, that's it. Okay. Recent members, Annie was at our AGM last week and invited me to come and briefly present here. So we're an international not-for-profit organisation, membership-based. We have 3 staff. We've been through mostly for the 18 months, around 20 odd members across Europe and North America, mostly archives, libraries, research organisations. Keep pressing the wrong button, sorry. Yeah, okay. We're basically set up to sustain project results. Our main 3 strands are technology, knowledge, and working with communities. Software products you probably will have heard of, one of which is Jove. We didn't write it, we inherited it from Harvard, then through Gary McGath. You know, it's embedded in Rosetta. We're currently on version 1.16. One way I think we can help the community is try to ensure that the testing, and so Jove's horribly tested is one of my points. For software that's supposed to be guaranteeing that files will be good for 100 years, the software's not really tested if anyone really cared if it worked next week. I'd like to see us improve the testing. We're working on that, automated testing, and also to up the confidence in software to the point where new versions can get into Rosetta and other repository software as quickly as possible. Final slide, I'll keep it very short. Our other main piece of software which we have developed from the ground up is VeraPDF. This is done as part of a consortium with the PDF Association and the DPC in this country as well, underneath the EU's Preforma project. That's now ready, it's version 1.6, open source, all validation of 8 PDFA flavors. There's also custom policy checking for non-PDFAs, so you can enforce policy upon any PDF documents. Once again, it's written in Java, the testing's a lot better than Jove, and we're hoping to work with the likes of Ex Libris to try to make sure that this gets its way into Rosetta sooner rather than later. Thanks very much for your attention. I won't go on anymore.
We have now a couple of debts that we need to pay. Actually, we are happy to pay. That's from yesterday, so we need to complete 2 additional lighting talks that we couldn't complete yesterday because we had to evacuate the room, and also I would like to show an example of from our offer session, the example of AAAF. We couldn't show it yesterday, so we'll show it now, and then we'll continue with the rest of the agenda. So we'll start with Voss. Just open this.
Okay, I've got to stand still. So this is lightning talk is called Doing More with More Digital Preservation Tools, and of course Rosetta is a digital preservation tool. Right now I think it's the premier digital assets management system you can get. I'm not sure how much preservation we're necessarily doing, because it has to be more than just checksums. So we wanted to talk about what more preservation tools we could get in here. And we have all the tools available to us. We have things like EXIF tool, and we have VeraPDF. We have Saxon for better XML validation. They're just not necessarily in Rosetta. But this isn't a problem. I mean, this isn't Ex Libris' problem at this point, and the focus of this talk is really just about what we can do to help Ex Libris again. And so we've just heard from Josh, there's the developer network, there's the GitHub that's offered by Ex Libris. And so I'm keen to understand what the knowledge economy would be around more people in this room creating plugins for themselves and sharing. And so for the first, there's meant to be animations in this slide, but there are none today because it's PDF. But so if we start here with the process of a plugin development, you have an internal process where you might create something for yourselves. Then you might share it with the community and you might ask for their opinion. I really want to see what the dialogue needs to be like to then end up with global integration, so where it becomes one of these plugins that comes out of the box when you buy Rosetta. So a new customer comes along and they can have access to all the plugins that we've all developed in this room. And then the last part of the animation was that acorn that was going to slip in from the side, and then I was going to discuss what would it look like? If we create these plugins, can we develop a baseline API for tools being created by other people like OPF or little bits of scripts and bits of code that you're writing for yourselves, a minimum API that tools could support that could then make it easier to integrate them into Rosetta. And so, yeah, the things I'm interested in really, or Archives New Zealand are interested in, we made these slides together, is how do we find the limits of what plugins can do? Art Spiegelman is the one I remember who said it, but I'm sure it's just ripped off from a million other artists. But you have to do 100,000 drawings to become a good artist. And it's the same with code. How many plugins do we have to create to find out what is and isn't possible? And I think we can only do that as we become more expressive by creating more. How do we get more tools? How do we get more tools into the system at the same time as other tools? Andrea brought it up last year, namespaces, so just bringing it up again this year. Because at the end of the day, a tool can do many different things. They're multidimensional, they can correct, they can do metadata extraction, they can do metadata extraction that you're going to use today for validation, profile validation, policy validation, for example, or it can bring up metadata that you're going to use for preservation in the future. So how do we incorporate this idea that tools can do many different things? How do we make it open to more developers, and what else? And how do we test more? So if someone develops a plugin, so Sloob and then Church of Latter-day Saints, how do we take their work and test it as a community and develop this set of feedback loops that's important to seeing the product improve? And yeah, I've already discussed the API. And we're not just here to say, oh, this would be nice. Archives New Zealand, I guess, wants to put its hand up and say, we could do more as well. And we are interested in being part of developing this capability to develop more plugins. And we have a couple of plugins that we're interested in developing or thinking about developing. And so wouldn't it be nice if plugins we've got here are character encoding? It was discussed yesterday. Also, there was a nice one that Francesca brought up about source code and Yvonne as well. So getting things like count lines of code into the system. Finding character encodings for things that are more than just XFMT 111. Embedded object evaluation, so looking at the content, the things like images or PDFs that are embedded in things like PowerPoints, so we can think about how those are preserved, because that's going to be what digital preservation becomes. And then missing object evaluation. So this might be an ingest plugin where we can identify missing objects for things like PowerPoints where there's external video or something. So that's what we're interested in. We just wanted to say we're interested to talk. Anyone who is also interested, just drop us an email on one of the lists. It looks like the Digital Preservation Working Group is going to be really good in helping us to support this. And so maybe that's where we have the conversation. Thank you.
Hi. So I guess it makes sense that I came right after Ross, because I'm going to be talking a bit about a problem that we had and how we solved it, and he's a player in this resolution of this. So we currently have been on Rosetta for three-ish years, and most of our content has been from digitized collections. When we started looking at our born digital collections, there are different issues with those types of materials, and so we kind of had to think about a new way, a new deposit process. We currently use our METS deposit process for digitized content, but that requires people to know about METS and also to have server access and running Unix commands, and there's training and certain knowledge that needs to happen with that workflow, and we needed something that was more lightweight for a new digital archivist to deposit content. So we chose the CSV method, and we tried to use the out-of-the-box zip to CSV function, which is where you can upload a zip into Rosetta and then kind of click a button and it'll give you a CSV that's formulated based on the content included in that zip. But we already had created checksums for these files years ago when we had acquired them, and so we had the checksums already. We wanted to verify those during deposit, and then also we wanted to add notes about files that had been renamed, and we don't have any in-house software development to write a custom tool. So our solution was that I don't know if we posted a message on the list or something like that, and then Ross got back to me and said that he had kind of done the same thing at Archives New Zealand, and so we kind of tested the potential of using what he had written, and there's a link to his code in there if we get the slides later. It's also on his GitHub site. But so the result of that is that our digital archivist can do all the steps herself. She doesn't need server access. She just uses, there are some Python scripts, but she can run those. And then we've been loading our born digital content now into Rosetta for about 6 months. And we've got over 500,000 files in there, and it continues to grow steadily. So I guess, and also, if I can say that for Ross, it seemed helpful for him to be able to see the code kind of in the wild and get a sense of what maybe how the documentation could be fixed, or kind of streamlining it, making it more robust, which is helpful for us, of course, but also helpful for internal staff that will be using it in the future. That's all.